Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, David Ray, the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer for Micro Focus Government Solutions. David, before break, you opened the door for a discussion around DevSecOps. This also has got to talk about automation, and really the two pieces here are driving transformation, which is really the third piece of that three-legged stool of cloud. Let's start with transformation. That's, I think, the big goal that OMB is laying out, that agencies have for themselves in 2020 and beyond. Walk me through how you guys are viewing transformation.
Sure. Well, we see transformation as a digital transformation. And one of the things we looked at about 5 to 6 years ago was a new model for IT based on the new tools around IT. Because for a long time, the model was plan, build, run. But what was missing with automation is delivery. So we worked to develop an open standard for IT based on the IT for IT standard with the Open Group, which includes deliver as part of that automation play within IT management, and then developed a reference architecture and specific standards around that vendors could adopt. So the government basically can shift a lot of their requirements to vendors to provide through content capabilities.
Let me jump in. When you say open standard for IT, we know what open standard means.
Correct.
It's not non-proprietary, the
Correct.
easy definition. But what does it do? Like, help me understand what it means.
Sure. So like IBM, Boeing, Shell, ServiceNow, and Micro Focus are all members of a consortium, and we've agreed upon a reference architecture for IT management, which includes the service model, the data model, the key performance indicators that a certain IT function should deliver. So it doesn't compete with ITIL, which is a process, best practice. It's more of a functional description of IT. Okay. And therefore, when the government builds requirements, they can specify the measurements and data elements that they'd like, and any tool they purchase that conforms should easily align, and it shifts that integration cost then. We have this in telecom, we have it in financial, with purchase to order, and we have it in other sectors, in manufacturing. We just never did it for IT. So, it's something we did about a decade ago, and it was adopted about 4 years ago, and we're aligning our portfolio to that standard, as are other vendors. And
this will drive transformation, because if it's on an open standard, the product, while important, the plug and play can happen more easily.
Absolutely, it's the interoperability, and I think that plays a big part with DevOps. Because what's going on right now, DevOps is essentially where cloud was, 5 years ago. It's a lot of marketing with hundreds of tools, and no consolidation has occurred yet, in the tool cycle. So the wrong way to approach it is to put a big BPA together to choose 500 tools and give it to all your developers. I think the right way to approach it is to provide, take it off the local teams, the DevOps teams, and provide true enterprise services for software assurance, for performance management, performance testing, for source code control, as well as the provisioning and monitoring and operations pieces. So we saw that several years ago, and the efficiencies that could be gained, and actually internally, our own R&D, we built quite a comprehensive software factory to solve that, using a lot of our tools as well as some open source tools.
I want to delve deeper into that software factory, but before we do that, let me tag back around. As agencies are moving down the path of DevSecOps, I think that's where we hear that more often. I see a lot of progress, a lot of people talking about it. What are you seeing? Are they making actual progress, or are they putting a new skin, if you will, on top of waterfall?
I think there's some wonderful examples where they've had local teams having excellence within a program or within a project. But I think the opportunity we're missing is to have enterprise policy and services and consolidation of the tool chain. Because what happens is when it gets down to developers, there's a lot of vulnerabilities in open source software. Almost 50% of it has known vulnerabilities. And you can scan and remove them, but there's no sharing of knowledge across development teams. And there's no central scanning of code so they can share on lessons learned and techniques. So you really need to treat it as an enterprise, as a service for those development teams to get consistent, predictable results across the tool chain. You'll get good results in a program or a team, but if you want results towards mission capability that are predictable and repeatable, let's say within DoD as a whole, you need to provide those, enterprise services around it. And that's been our focus with enterprise DevOps, with security, built in.
And that's a great segue to the software factory, because you guys drank your own champagne. We don't say eat your own dog food anymore, but by developing this software factory, you're able to show, hey, we're doing it for our own products, and here are the
Correct.
benefits government. That's what you're
Correct.
saying,
And,
your clients.
And I like to think of it as 1,000 problems solved. We started this several years ago, and the biggest problem was getting adoption. Within our own development teams, we had 500 of them, right? And every one of them had their own tool chain and their own tool sets. We had hundreds of redundant processes between test and dev, and anything from taking a product to market. When you look at that entire tool chain, we had a lot of redundancies and duplicity within ourselves, and so we used the framework I just talked about, an open standard, to rationalize our tool chain to 11 to 12 products. Even though we had multiple tools for some areas, we had to make some choices. And then we built an end-to-end measurement product, based on our Octane product for Agile, which aligned us closer with an enterprise scale, a safe methodology we were rolling out. And so that's basically the economy of scale that we achieved. And today we're doing about 20 to 30 million scans nightly of our source code, and we've been able to do close to 2,000 production releases of software a year, as well as about the same, 2,000 or so change releases. So we've improved, our velocity, and we reduced our risk, and most importantly, with less tools and less processes, we're able to align much better with the new NIST, framework for supply chain management, especially around the software supply chain. Everything can be built here in the USA for our government customers, and we can validate and inspect that entire tool chain much easier because we have less component parts. So I'm a little fearful, with some of the agencies of what they're doing, because they're more or less creating a supermarket of products, and they really need to focus on one or two success stories products and developing the services.
Is this software factory something you could take the concepts and the tools and move it into an agency and do it as a service? Definitely.
One of the things that our whole focus was to give it to our customers. So we have a content repository, which we store in Enterprise GitHub. We're using GitHub. We're using some open source artifactories and some other things that are provided, as part of our tool chain. But we make that available for agencies to be able to pull down all the content for integrations. And if they pick tools that align with standards, that we've talked about, it makes the integration even easier to set up that tool chain. But essentially, it's about a dozen or so products.
Okay. And when you talk about DevSecOps in the government, what types of questions? What are you hearing from your clients about? Hey, how do we get started? Or hey, we're already down this path, and here's the big obstacle we're facing. Or is there anything, any trends you'd point to?
Yeah, most of the questions I get today are about integration of tools and how to do some of the automation. So they're very tactical at a low level. So they may want to know, how do I integrate a scanner for containers as well as scanners for open source with your Fortify product, let's say, for SEC, for your source code management control. And we'll give them content to allow them to do that. But what they really should be asking is, how do I drive value so I get adoption by teams for this enterprise service? And they're not quite there yet. What we discovered is we had to have a service owner and a technical owner. And the service owner was more or less an evangelist that was for the developer to make sure that the services we were providing were adding value. If it wasn't adding value, we were at the wrong level. We were too low, trying to implement things at perhaps the developer's level of his tools. You don't want to mess with his tools and his library. You want to be at the right level. And for us, it was making sure they were updating their Kanban from an Agile perspective, and we were getting the measurements and metrics we needed back, and also using our enterprise, SCCM product, and as well as our code scanning and code testing tools and services we rolled out.
One of the other piece of this is, as we walk through the transformation, the DevSecOps, the software factory, is data security. And I think that's a piece that sometimes people lose sight of. Everything agencies do is based on data. They can't secure the data if they don't create the trust with the data, but also make it accessible at the same time. It's when we talk about striking the balance, that's really the piece where agencies need to do the most work. How does all this fit into this discussion of transformation, fit into how agencies need to manage their data better to go forward?
That's a great point. I think that you really hit on something. There's a lot of duplicity and waste in data, which creates not just compliance and FOIA issues, but a huge security risk. And the data, quite frankly, the government has a ton of data on citizens, and they're starting to share that, between DMV, not healthcare data, but IRS data, tax information with census data, to answer new questions that that people are asking, about citizens so they can essentially serve them better, and improve public safety and other things. But the problem is that they're not doing a very good job at securing that data. And there are techniques like encryption in use that NIST has recommended, but yet Congress has failed to put any specific laws in place for encryption use. Today, most agencies are only concerned about encryption at rest or in transit, which quite frankly isn't good enough. You have to protect that data essentially even when you're doing analytics or when it's in use, especially if you're going to share it, across agencies or between agencies with the APIs and some of the things that they're developing. So I think the first step is to deduplicate a lot of that data, defensively delete data, and make sure that you understand how it relates to the infrastructure from a security perspective and how it relates to applications. And that's another area where agencies are incredibly weak. They may have inventory data, but they don't understand how that inventory relates to the security event information that's occurring and where the data is located and what data is there. That knowledge is a mystery to a lot of the NOCs and the SOCs that are in federal environments today.
And that really tags back to the beginning of our conversation when we talked about security and CDM. You got to know what data is out there, where it lives, and what it says to make better decisions about how to secure, how to deal with high-value assets. Are agencies going down the path of discovering their dark data? Are they going down the path of dealing with unstructured data? Or is that's something we'll talk about in 3 or 4 years from now?
I think they're going to, unfortunately, I think they're going to find out as they start having breaches that they need to be paying more attention to that area. Today, it's really around refining and doing optimization, data center optimization, and automation at a lower level. And there is not a tie between where data is located and how it relates back to a mission capability or an application today. That does not exist. You can derive it with some AI tools, and we have some analytics tools for both security and operations that can help with that, but it really requires a mapping of a full topology of a mission capability. And our agencies aren't there today. Now on the commercial side, it's a different story. They have complete visibility, for their high-value assets and the topology, and it's easier for them to create watch lists from a security perspective in their SOC, and it's easier for them to protect, their crown jewels and their IP. On the government side, we're just not quite there yet. I'm hoping CDM Defend will get people more interested in that topic, and also using things like voltage for encryption and use technologies that are being recommended by NIST.
David, we're just about out of time. Before I let you go, what's the big takeaway from our conversation today? As you talk to clients, as you talk to customers, what's the message that they should understand about transformation?
Well, I think they really should focus on taking a closer look at Cloud Smart, and then taking a look at these requirements holistically, because you can do things that are foundational that help you, transform to cloud, address Cloud Smart and CDM, and improve operational capabilities at the same time. There's just some foundational things that you can fix in your environments and solve multiple problems. And I don't think agencies are doing that today, mainly because of the way programs and budgets and IT is structured. They're solving one use case or one problem, and then they end up with a lot of duplicity in tools. And I would love to try and help them, talk through some of those problems. And we're making some progress in DoD and civilian, but quite frankly, they're not asking the right questions today.
Well, you brought budget. We could have a whole show on budget, but maybe next time, because unfortunately we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guest, David Ray, the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer at Micro Focus Government Solutions. David, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you, Jason. It was a pleasure being here.
You've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.